The days are getting shorter. The weather is getting cooler. The sweaters and the blankets are getting cozier. And there's a wonderful crispness to the air. The leaves are changing color and falling to the ground to crunch under our boots. It must be fall. The best time of the year, at least in my opinion. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional, the book podcast from the Port Moody Public Library. This is Sadie, and I will be your host today. And I am joined by my book friends, Corrine and Virginia. And today, as you may have guessed, we will be diving into the feel of fall, or at least the colors of fall, or the timing of fall, or something to do with fall. So we are going to be discussing fall themed or fall colored books today. Now, I'm really looking forward to hearing about my book friends' choices. But before we get to books, I am curious, Corrine and Virginia, how do you feel about fall just in general? How does it kind of stack up with the other seasons in your mind?
Yeah, Virginia, how does it stack up? Hmm. I like fall aesthetics. I do like the color scheme. I think that's very nice. Love a like red, orange, and yellow leaf. Love that. Um, but in many ways I also hate it because I'm cold all the time and it's rainy and it's dark and fall is just like a prelude to winter. It's just like, hey, remember the good times that you had in the summer? That's done now. That's over. It's like a slow, painful end.
And obviously, I feel completely the opposite of everything that Corinne just said. This is absolutely my favorite season because it's the perfect weather, perfect temperature, perfect everything. It's not too cold, not too hot. It is just and it also like during the summer, it's like this is the only thing I get to look forward to is that it is going to end and fall is going to come. It has to come. And so it is the best thing, it's the best season. Everything is just perfect. So, yeah.
How dare you say the perfect temperature? How dare you? It was so cold today, and you get so aware of your ankles when it's that cold. I don't want to be that hyper aware of my ankles as I am walking. Anyways, Sadie, fall thoughts.
I'm curious why you're hyper aware of your ankles, first of all. Do you just wear a lot of things that expose the ankles and the breeze gets in? So I'm just curious, just very curious.
It's like when the cold kind of hits you and then you become aware of like each joint and bone and muscle in your fragile little body. Um, I feel the cold very, very poorly. Like if I hold like an iced coffee for a minute, my fingers like ache for like 10 minutes afterwards. And so it's like I'm too aware of my ankles, which not are like naked, like hanging out. But because I usually wear like skirts, they're usually like in tights. And so they're a little bit more exposed to the elements than like, let's say, I don't know, my kneecap. My kneecap, generally have an awareness of, but like in the fall, I really become aware of those ankles and like the multitude of tiny bones within them.
I don't think I've ever
Okay.
think that hard about my any body parts, period. So, okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, as I think I've made abundantly clear, I love fall. Fall in my mind is, as Virginia said, the perfect season. I would argue that the beginning of fall is way too hot. And this temperature, like this morning, I was out there just like in my sweater, and I was so happy about how nice and cool it was. And yeah, so I'm similar to Virginia, where during summer I just spend time waiting for it to end. I think, Karine, I think I'm similar to you, but opposite, where heat affects me so much. And like the second I get the tiniest bit too hot, I'm so uncomfortable. And I think it's because I'm always hot. I'm like never not warm. And so I am, yeah, it's I know it's in your mind, it's probably wonderful. In my mind, it's absolutely horrible. I would love to be cold just once, just once. So yeah, so that's why I prefer the fall, and I even like the winter. I do.
Um,
I
Come
know.
on.
I know. I like
And
snow. I like cold. I'm sorry.
we need like a Freaky Friday situation where we could do like a body swap for one day just to like understand each other's point of view. And then like we could appreciate all the seasons. I think that's what the moral of that Lindsay Lohan movie was.
It's definitely about seasons, obviously about seasons.
Oh, it was about the seasons of life.
Deep, very, very profound thoughts for a Friday morning. Yeah. Well, how do you feel about fall, listeners? What are your thoughts on fall and the Lindsay Lohan movie Freaky Friday and Jamie Lee Curtis? Is that the mom in that one? Yeah, or the original, which I think was Haley Mills. Am I getting that name right?
Yes, you are. And they're also making a sequel to the Lindsay Lohan, Jamie Lee Curtis, Freaky Friday. Yeah, I don't know what there's left to say about.
Regular Saturday. It's
Just a day where everyone goes about their business
doing the
as
same
usual.
thing. Nothing different happens.
We should clearly be writing movie plots. I think that's clear. Anyways, thank you, Great Virginia, for weighing in on fall and Lindsay Lohan movies. All right, let's get to our books. I am going to go first today. And for my book, I was actually hoping to find something that had a bit more of a fall feel to it, kind of a fall vibe, something with pumpkin patches or corn mazes or just something like that. But as I love it. It's wonderful. But everything I saw was either not very interesting sounding or had, I think one of the ones I was looking at had 100-person waiting list. So I wasn't really into waiting that long or buying the book that I had no idea if it would be good or absolutely horrible. So instead, I opted to go with a book that features fall colors. And coincidentally, the book does actually take place in the fall, which I think is maybe mentioned once in the full 500 pages, but that's okay because it still adds to the mood of everything. So this is the Dagger and the Flame, lovely oranges and reds on the cover. Doesn't really give you a fall feel, but that's okay. It has the color scheme, and that's what I was going for. Anyways, this is by Catherine Doyle, and it takes place in the fictional city of Fantome. And Fantome is a city of cobbled streets and dark alleys, secret catacombs, and a mysterious magic called shade. The city is run by two rival guilds called the Cloaks and the Daggers. Now, each guild uses the shade magic to further their efforts. The Cloaks, who are the thieves, use it to mask their movements, weaving it into their clothing so they can hide in the shadows and disappear. The Daggers, who are the assassins, use it in a much darker way. They drink the shade, essentially turning themselves into shadows themselves and becoming nearly invincible killers who can stop a person's heart with just the touch of their hands within 10 heartbeats. If this dark magic is also slowly eating away at their bodies and their souls, then that's just the price that they have to pay for wielding this power. Now, the guilds were founded centuries ago by two rival brothers who had been the first to discover the magical properties of the shade producing plant. Now, these two guilds keep their distance from each other, living under a shaky truce as they both vie for control of the city. Seraphine Marchand, or Sarah, has grown up around shade magic. Her mother is a shade supplier, harvesting the plant and processing its roots to create the black powder that holds the magic itself. She then sells it directly to the Cloaks. Sarah has helped her to prepare the magic since she was a child and knows the power that it holds. But her mother has always been very clear. They would never sell their supply to the Daggers, and Sarah was never, ever supposed to drink it. To drink shade was to give up your soul. When she wasn't processing shade, Sarah's mother ran a vineyard, growing the grapes on their small farm. It was a relatively quiet life, and Sarah was kind of okay with that. And then everything changed. Sarah came home one day from the fields to find her house engulfed in flame, and her mother's lifeless body lying on the ground, the tall form and unmistakable silver eyes of a Dagger assassin standing over her. Sarah runs. Feeling the eyes of the Dagger on her back, she runs and she runs. Her mother always told her that if anything ever happened, she was to make her way to the House of the Cloaks. They would take her in and keep her safe. So, relying on her own knowledge of the city and the tracking abilities of her small terrier, Pippin, she finds the Cloak's house, knowing that the whole time she's being trailed by the Dagger assassin. Her mother, it seems, was not the only one who had a mark on her head. Sarah is reluctantly taken into the Cloaks and begins her training to become a master thief, trying to keep both her actual identity and the fact that she's still being trailed by an assassin hidden. However, when she's out on her first job, she finally comes face to face with the person who is trying to kill her. After a brief fight, she finds herself just heartbeats away from her last breath, with the Dagger's hand wrapped around her throat. However, 2 heartbeats before her heart stops, the Dagger's hand is suddenly removed. Sarah looks up into his eyes which are no longer the silver of shade magic, eyes that are now incredibly confused. Sarah should be dead, but instead, Sarah has somehow eaten away at every last drop of magic in the assassin's body. Sarah only has a brief moment to think about the reason for this before she takes a letter opener and drives it into the assassin's stomach. Ransom has been a Dagger for half his life. He was taken in when he was 10 by Gaspard Dufour, the head of the assassins, and given a chance at a life that he never would have had otherwise. Before, he had a family. He had a mother, a sister, and a father. A father who would get drunk and take out his anger on Ransom's mother. A father who got drunk a lot. And so one day, Ransom's mother made the choice to leave, to take her children and find another city, another home. But Ransom's father found out and tried to stop them. So Ransom puts himself in the way of his father's blows, allowing his sister and his mother to escape. When he wakes up, his mother and sister are gone, but Ransom is left, and his father is still there. So he's given a choice. He's offered the taste of magic, of power, of revenge. And his father becomes his first official kill as a member of the Daggers. He has been selling his soul to Gaspard Dufour ever since. He dreams that one day he'll be able to escape. He'll be able to leave this life of death behind and find his mother and sister and live a normal life. But until then, he must keep bowing to Dufour, the man who has, in a way, been like a father to him, who has been grooming him to take over the Daggers one day. And so he keeps killing for Dufour, finding small joys in the friendships he has with a few of the fellow Daggers. But his latest mark is different. She's young, for one, maybe even the same age as Ransom, and Dufour refuses to tell him why she needs to be killed, which makes Ransom curious. He starts to get close, but not to kill her, to find out more about her. However, when he comes face to face with her and witnesses the pure hatred in her eyes, he knows that he must complete his assignment. As he wraps his hand around her throat and shockingly begins to feel the magic drain out of his body, he doesn't know what to do. He knows even less what to do when she plunges the letter opener into his stomach. This is a story about Sarah and Ransom, about 2 rivals who are pitted against each other in a fight for their lives. But it is also the story that began centuries ago, when the lone sister of two brothers tried to end their feud and instead lost her life. It is a story of revenge, of a mother who will stop at nothing to finally take down the man who is responsible for the pain in her life, who will go so far as to create a city of monsters, terrible creatures who kill at random and terrorize the city, all with the hope that they will kill the one person that she wants dead. It is a story of a daughter who must now fix what her mother started while trying to discover the source of her own very powerful magic, all while trying not to fall in love with the enemy. So I actually really enjoyed this book. The reviews have compared it to Leigh Bardugo and Sarah J. Maas, which I think it does definitely have a very similar vibe to both of those authors. It is a bit dramatic at times, and the romantic elements can be a bit over the top sometimes. But overall, I think that both Sarah and Ransom are quite likable and sympathetic characters. And it's very easy to kind of be pulled into their story and their adventure as they try to figure out what exactly is happening in their city, trying to figure out how they can save the day without losing themselves to each other and losing themselves to the guilds that they are a part of and sold their lives to. I think that this is a book for anyone who's looking for a very classic YA fantasy romance. It has a strong dose of assassins, which everybody knows I really, really like. Um, it has some found family and enemies to lovers tropes in it. So if you're a fan of those two tropes, then I think this would be a good fit as well. I think if you like Leigh Bardugo, as I said, Sarah J. Maas, even Scott Lynch's Lies of Locke Lamora, and then also MJ Kuhn's Among Thieves, they all kind of felt like they had the similar vibe of like this city that's on the brink of disaster, and there's kind of rival gangs and guilds that are holding it together and vying for control. And yeah, you kind of have these people who are just trying to make their way in this city and figure out what to do. So I think that they all have a very similar feel to them. This one definitely had much more romance in it than at least Lies of Locke Lamora does. But I think that Leigh Bardugo, Sarah J. Maas, and MJ Kuhn is pretty much right on par with those authors. So I think that if you enjoy those books or those authors, then this would definitely be a good fit. It's also the first book of a series. So if you're looking for something new that you can really get invested in, then I think that this would also be a really good fit for you. Like I said, I really loved it. I think that similar to the one that I did, I think it was a couple weeks ago, the Zoraida Cordova one, it kind of checked all the boxes that I was looking for in the moment. And it just kind of brought me back to my roots of what I love about YA fantasy romance. So this is The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle. All right. Next up, I think we're going to go to Kareen. Kareen, did you go fall colors, fall theme? How did you look at this category?
Ooh, let's go with theme. Let's go with theme. Yeah, I'm going to say that fall is for reading, because you don't want to go outside because the outside is horrible. So fall is for reading, and so I chose a reading-y theme. I'm also going to say the cover is fall colors. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say and it happens. The story starts in fall. So I was genuinely surprised when I opened it up, and the first thing is like, oh, and we're in like mid-October, and I was like, fantastic, brief fulfilled. Does it stay in fall? No, but it returns to fall once more. And a beautiful cycle of life. All right. So yeah, I did something a little bit unusual for this one, in that I am talking about a sequel that I have mentioned in the podcast before, the first book, as one of my most anticipated. And I'll be like the most honest in that I didn't love it. And yet, did I also buy the sequel? Yeah, I did, because I need it to be complete if I'm going to own it. So they need to be together on the shelf. You just can't have one, like the second book in a series, hanging out without the first one, like a single snaggletooth in a mouth. Like, So I bought the second one and was pleasantly surprised by it. I'm going to apologize in advance if some of the details are a little vague. I was reading this at approximately 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning. And so some of my memories are a little vague. But I think I've got the gist of it. Mostly because not much happens. So it's a little hard to do a summary of it. This is more about like more about like vibes. It's all about like the vibes. It's all about the vibes. So, um, let's try this. So, hidden in the Jimbocho neighborhood in Tokyo is a book lover's paradise. There is a street that is lined with second-hand bookstores. In fact, there are almost 170 second-hand bookstores that line this quiet little neighborhood. You're always going to find the story that you're looking for, and maybe two or three more books while you're there. The Morisaki bookstore is one of these. It's very small, it's very cramped, it's almost overflowing with books to the point where, including the proprietor, it can really only hold about 5 people at a time or risk total collapse. It specializes in Japanese literature, and it's been in the family for 3 generations. It is currently owned by our protagonist, 25-year-old Takako's uncle, Satoru. He has been devoted to this bookstore ever since he took it over after his wife Momoko left him. Now, Takako, in our first book, is having kind of a rough year. She just recently found out that her boyfriend is marrying someone else, which is an awkward state of affairs. And here's where my memory gets fuzzy. I'm pretty sure they also worked together, which is why workplace romances are always a terrible idea, because you can't escape from them because they're also at work with you. Unless it works out, which plays good for you. Good for you. Yeah, good for you. Some people on this podcast. But maybe you're the exception to the rule because it doesn't work for our protagonist and it's really awkward. She has to like quit her job. Anyways, she accepts an offer by her uncle to come and live on top of the bookstore and on the other floor, rent free, which again sounds like a dream. If all I have to pay for that is like emotional devastation, so be it. So be it. Sounds great. Of course, while she's there at the bookstore, after spending a couple of days, I think she calls them like her floor days or her sleeping days of sadness, she eventually picks up a book and starts to kind of re-find and rediscover herself in those stories. And as summer turns to fall in the original, she finds that she has a lot in common with her uncle and they have a lovely relationship together. Now we pick up with the sequel, More Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa, translated by Eric Ozawa. And fall is giving way to that other season that I don't care to talk about. So yeah, we're deep in the fall things. It's October and it is October and Takako is visiting her uncle in Jimbocho neighborhood. And she kind of again gets a little enmeshed into all the curious little customers of the bookstore, including the guy with the really ugly sweater, or the guy who's collecting the seals of specific authors. So like their collection of books, they put their library book seal in them. And then there's like little collectors who buy the books to collect like the author's library seal in the back, which I thought was really cool. And Sabu, a really old, annoying guy who refuses to tell her what his job is or where his money comes from. He seemed fine. Her uncle lives through hemorrhoids. Just a lot of details about that. The business of book selling. And the book chronicles the quiet lives and loves of the people in the neighborhood. As I said, not much happens. People have like little kerfuffles that honestly could really be solved with a really quick conversation of, hey, oh, I see you on the street that you are talking to your ex-girlfriend. Instead of hiding in the shadows, perhaps I could just go up and introduce myself other than making awkward assumptions about what's going on. Or, hey, you stopped texting me. Instead of just like wallowing despair and making the entire neighborhood like grumpy about all of your excess emotions, I could just talk to the person about what's up. But anyways, that's not the point. As I said, this is about vibes. And was I bawling like a newborn child at 3 o'clock in the morning because something happened in this book? Yeah. I ugly cried at this book. I ugly cried so bad that I think my eyes are like practically swollen shut right now. I was emotionally devastated and I don't know why. I don't know that these books are like extremely well written. They're very like quiet and there's more talk of hemorrhoids and they're very still and silent and the writing is not like extremely poetic. It's just kind of very straightforward. And yet, and yet, there is something so like furiously compelling about it that I can't really put my fingers on. And I think, kind of harkening back to one of our other episodes, like it's cozy. Like bad, bad things kind of happen, but not that bad. And they're kind of beautiful and taken as a matter of fact, and it's such an interesting ethos to kind of dip into of like things are just things that happen and there's not a lot you can do about them. And I think that that is really encapsulated by the uncle's wife Momoko and kind of her battle with illness. And it's just like a it is just like a beautiful kind of meditation on life is all about really quiet moments and kind of like appreciating the very simple things in front of you. It's not about the big fireworks moments or these grand gestures. It's about small things and showing up for people every day. And yeah, this book like creeps up on you in that way, in that you know what's coming. Oh, you know what's coming. You can see it from a million miles away. And yet it's like a stupid Pixar movie where you're like, this is designed to make me cry and I resent that. And yet here I am, just like snot jumbled in my sinuses, gross tears on my pillow, like yeah. So anyways, yeah, and the fact that her uncle I finally figured out she's 25 in the book and her uncle's like 45 and she talked about him like he was like 1 foot in the grave and I was like, oh, oh. Oh, so yeah, other than that critique, yeah, if you're looking for something kind of like autumnal about the cycle of the seasons, and again, it's extremely short, which is nice. I think you could definitely pick up more days at the Morisaki Bookshop. I do think you'd have to read the first book before you read this book, but again, combined, they're like one book. And Sadie read like a 500-page like massive dictionary. So like you can do it if you just want to like vibe out for a little while and possibly weep. Then yeah, that's for you.
Can I ask, like, do you think, and this is a question for Sadie too, do you think reading something at like different times of the day makes a difference? Because I feel like, like at 1:30 in like 3 o'clock at night, I feel like I either cry at everything or I laugh uncontrollably for no reason because I'm so tired and everything just seems extra funny for no reason. Like, do you think like, because I don't know, like, is that a thing that affects people? Especially, I think many of you always say you're more kind of a mood reader. Is that like the time of the day? Like, reading on a sky train versus reading at like one, I don't know.
I I think yes. But I don't know whether it has to depend with like at certain times of the day I'm usually on the SkyTrain and I've only like openly wept on public transit like 3 times reading a book. Because I don't like to have any emotion on my face when I am taking the public transit, so no one engages with me. But I do think like at night, because you're usually like more alone, you're kind of left with your thoughts. It's like a sadder time of day, like, and nothing and no good decisions are made after 2:30 a.m. I think that it does like hit a little harder than it would in the bright light of day. Because like, you read something sad and you're like, and I'm so alone and life is gonna, and you're like stuck with all of like your night thoughts, which are not the same as your day thoughts. So I really do think I think you are absolutely correct in that the time of day really affects it. Because I think if I read this, well, no, I still would have cried. If I read certain books in the morning, I don't think that they would have the impact that they did, because then I would have to like go to work. So I think that there is really something.
Sadie?
I'm in bed every night by like 9 o'clock. Um, so I don't generally have the experience of reading later than like 10. Um, Occasionally when I'm sitting there holding Evie, I'll try to read something, but I'll usually just end up playing Scrabble on my phone at like 4 a.m. as I'm rocking her. Um, so I don't know how much I can actually put into this conversation. Because I just tend to read the exact same time every single day. And I don't, yeah. So I don't have like the overtired emotions that add to it as much. Sorry.
No,
But like,
no,
do
no.
you have like,
Yeah.
yeah, like morning versus afternoon versus evening, like emotions? Because it doesn't need to be like wee horrible hours of the morning emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to just read before bed. That's the only time I have to read. So that's kind of, I mean, I do listen to audiobooks. I'll listen to audiobooks, but I feel like that might be a bit different when I'm driving. I try not to openly weep while I'm driving. Just find it's not as safe to do that. I always remember Fiona. I don't remember what book it was, but just explaining how they had to actually like pull their car over to the side of the road because they were crying so much from an audiobook. And I've never gotten to that point. Yeah, I don't know if I have, yeah. Or just like in general, I don't know if things are affect me kind of time at times of day as much, but yeah. Virginia, does it affect you? Did you answer the question already?
Well, when you're both talking, I was kind of thinking about like there's certain books I think I choose to read at certain times because of it. Like I just, like not just because of like, but the Sky Train reading or like whether it is like reading when I'm like, when my brain is not quite fully there and I'll just read something that it doesn't require too much. I find at night, yeah, definitely. Like, if I read at night, I mean I fall asleep really quickly too, but like but if I read at night, then definitely like things are just extra funny or extra sad, one or the other. I just can't deal. So I think like morning is the best time for me to read because if I actually want to like focus, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Morning 4 o'clock, oh, like the best time because that's when I'm fully awake. I know, like who the heck is fully awake at 4 a.m.? I am
I
fully
think it's because
awake.
we're the opposite. I haven't gone to sleep
Yeah,
yet, and you're
and
just
I'm like
waking
fully
up.
awake, yeah. And so like it's just the best time because then I'm like I feel like I can focus a lot more on books, whatever they are. So like there's one book I'm reading right now that has like it's a translated work, but like they choose to make it in one of them into like kind of Scottish. And like I'm just like, what am I reading? So like it has like it's slow going and I have to require a lot of like like kind of like sounding these words out so that I can see like, do I know what you're saying? And yeah, so that's the 4 a.m. book so that I can actually focus. So yeah.
I think it's interesting that you think things are funny because, like, at that point at night, I'm like, nothing is funny. Absolutely nothing. I stand there with I sit with an absolute stone face, and sometimes I see jokes, and I'm like, yes, that is a humor. Just that's
But I'm so tired. I'm so tired that things just gets really, really funny because everything is just like ridiculous. And it's just, even something that is not usually funny is funny because I'm just too tired.
Might I suggest that that's because you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning?
No, no. It's like I'm tired at 8 o'clock. Yeah, no, but like yeah. So I think after work, it's just I'm just like, you know,
it's like you're like punch drunk at 4 o'clock in the morning, just like woo, woohoo.
I'm so awake, so awake. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that I feel like that could be our existential question for this episode. I had another not as interesting question to ask you, but we could do that one too. So we've talked about times of day and how that affects our reading. But I'm curious for my book friends, is there a specific season that you prefer reading? And now, Kareen, you did say that fall is for reading because you don't want to be in the outdoor world. But would you say that that is like your favorite season to read in, or are there other seasons that you prefer to read in?
I think it's also because fall has like a lot of good holidays that are like do nothing holidays that it really like lends itself to the reading experience again because of like how I read. I sit down and do it in one go and that it's nice to have the holidays. So I find I do read more in fall. Also like the overwhelming debilitating stress of having to choose my top books of 2024. And in and around fall, the panic really starts kicking in. So that's a nice external motivator to get my act together and read the giant stack of 2024 books that I have at home. So yeah, this weekend is going to be a big fall reading season, shall we say?
See, like I don't have a favorite or like don't have a time that I feel like it's the season to read, but I definitely have a like least favorite because there is one season, as you know, Sadie, that is too hard to do anything. The minute you pick up a book, you just feel like, I can't focus because it's too darn hot. So that is my least favorite. It's the worst and it's the hardest to focus because it's too hot, even at 4 a.m.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I am a big cozy reader, so I love being able to just like bundle up and be covered in blankets and sweaters and have a cup of tea next to me, and doing that in the summer just is horrible. Even I feel like even Kareen, you would say that you probably wouldn't want to be covered up in many, many blankets. You would, wouldn't you? You totally would. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I always have a comforter. There's like maybe 3 days of the entire year that I sleep without a blanket. And I retire my hoodie late in the game. Late in the game. It goes away for 2 months. It's been back for weeks. Since late August, I brought that thing out.
All right, all right. I just feel like this is something that we will never see eye to eye on, and that's okay.
And as Sadie taught us earlier before we start the podcast, we just say interesting to it.
Very interesting. All right. Virginia, what fall themed or colored or adjacent book did you pick today?
Sadie, do you feel like this theme has gotten away from you?
Not at all. Not at all. I am firmly knowledgeable and in line with exactly what I meant for this week to be. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I definitely went with the aesthetics, like just because it's just makes life a little easier. So it's just the colors on the cover definitely give me that fall vibes. But I think after reading it, I realized that the themes in the story are also quite fitting for the season because autumn to me is always a time of like transition, right? We're talking about like leaves changing color. You're preparing for that other season that is coming. Like winter could also sometimes people feel like that's like the end, like it's like a time when everything is kind of coming to an end. But that after that period of inactivity, there's going to be rebirth, there's going to be regeneration. Sometimes you just can't see it because it's too cold, apparently. So, like very much like this time. I think this is a book about sort of tackling the times of that inevitable change. And so the book that I chose with, I feel like, kind of a fally color kind of cover is called The Avian Hourglass, and it is by Lindsey Drager. And when I was thinking about how to describe this book, I was trying to look for like a hook usually, right? Like, something that, can get people interested in the book. And I feel like I can't really, it's a book that you can't really reduce to be sort of a single plot line. There are a lot of like threads, a lot of symbols, a lot of metaphors that populate the story. And I think it would be doing it a disservice to the spirit of the book, I think, if I try to like find one through line. So apologies if this review seems a little fragmented, but I think it's on purpose. And I think the author is making a point with that. Our story takes place in an unnamed town after the crisis. We never found out what the crisis is, but it's something that has quite a big impact on the world. Environmentally, one of the biggest things is that there are no more birds. All the birds have disappeared. We are also unable to see the stars anymore because there's too many things in the air that obscure our view of them. This crisis is also causing a divide among the people. People now are either yes people or they're no people. Again, we don't know what yes and no mean, but we know that it's a different kind of point of view, different outlook in life perhaps. And it's been decades, and these yes and no people, they come together in demonstration, they come together in protest regularly. Our unnamed protagonist is a young mother of triplets. She was a surrogate mother, so these are not her children. But unfortunately, the parents died in an accident before the kids were born. And so she decided to raise them herself with the help of a couple other people. We got Yuri, who is the brother of the would-be mother, and he called her up after the accident and say he wants to be a part of the triplets' life and he wants to help. And so they got a duplex together, and each of them take one side, and they take turns taking care of the triplets. There's also Luce, who is the protagonist's aunt. She's the twin sister of her father, and she's no stranger to taking care of people because her father used to suffer from a lot of anxiety, from depression, from agoraphobia, and Lucci is always there to help her brother, to help our narrator. And whenever things get a little too much, whenever she thinks that this is not something that any child has to deal with, she'll take her away. And so she's there, very, very protective of our narrator. And now she's here again to help out with the triplets. All these characters are going through a time where there's a lot of changes in their lives and a lot of uncertainties. Our narrator is a bus driver, but she knows that that is no longer going to be her job very, very soon because the self-driving buses are coming. And she's studying to be a radio astronomer. This is something that she's always wanted to do. Her father has really instilled this love of space in her. And so she's wanted to do this forever, but this is her 5th time taking the exam, and she has failed the last 4 times. So she's not sure if she's able to pass because this is her last chance. You can only take this exam 5 times. And so she's worried that she's not going to pass. And then what? Because, she will lose her job very, very soon. Yuri used to be an insurance salesman, and now he is a playwright. He's trying to write, direct, and star in a play about Icarus, the man who flew too close to the sun. And so he's wearing his wings, and he's trying to figure out how to end the play, and he's not really sure how this is going to work. Luce, even though she's just been promoted at work, is also having some issues because at night she keeps thinking what am I actually doing? Because she used to work at a factory, and the factory is exactly straightforward, what you're making. But now she works at the farm. The farm is actually like a data kind of center. And so her job is to maintain these computers, maintain these cables, but she can't help but wonder what is being transferred in these cables? What is being communicated? And what am I unknowingly helping to pass along? And she's kind of worried about that. The town itself also has a couple mysteries going on. Birds' nests have been popping up all around town. And these are not because there's no more birds, so they are not made by birds, but they're made by people supposedly, and they're kind of human size. But each of the birds' nests is kind of constructed based on how that particular type of bird will actually build a nest. So it's imitating the style of the real bird's nest. But nobody knows who is making them. Nobody knows why they're making them, and they're just popping up in different parts of town. The other thing that the people are also very curious about is these cement blocks that have been that they have found. Our narrator is actually the first one to find one of these cement block that has the words names of the planets on them, and the one that she found was a Saturn, and that was the first one that she found. And so now everybody in town is interested to find these cement blocks, and they're trying to figure out, like, where they are located. And there's so many theories going on, and everybody's kind of going on like a bit of a scavenger hunt. The yes people and the no people all doing it, trying to figure out where they can find these planets. And there's a lot of stories and theories associated with them. Those are kind of some of the main kind of storylines throughout the book, but there's also a lot of other symbols throughout the book, a lot of repetitions that kind of provide different entries into sort of the author's message and what she's trying to say, or what I think she's trying to say. Many of them are kind of things, are sort of things about revisiting the past, and trying to understand the present. For example, in Luce's backyard, there's lots and lots of globes. These were all made by our narrator's two grandfathers. And they used to make them, and people will come to them with their globe and say, oh, this is out of date, I need it updated. And instead of like unpeeling what is on there, they will basically just tape the new map kind of over it. So in some ways, the history of what happened before, the old world, so to speak, are always there, waiting to be uncovered. And that also ties in with different people that came into this town that are from countries that no longer exist. Luce also has a love of etymology, very interested in how words came about, what are the origins. And so if you wrote the book, she shared a lot of that whenever a word came up. Our narrator also has a habit of rewinding a cassette tape. So you'll see her doing that very frequently, trying to go back to the past and listen to the tape again. She also has a lot of episodes of deja vu. And so, from those, we kind of like get a sense of her past. We learn about her father, for example, from her aunts, talking about how he has a theory about life that really scares him, and that might have contributed to some of the anxiety that he was experiencing. He has lost his father now, but she bonded with another person in town who has also lost someone because the system has failed them both. And so we have times when they sit together, not quite ready to share the details about the people that they have lost yet, but they are sitting together but apart in the same time in that grieving process. We also get to hear stories about her younger self, especially about the only person she's ever loved. It's a girl that she met when she was younger that she didn't know she loved until the girl is gone. They are basically both supposed to leave town together, but only the other girl did. And we slowly find out about their stories, about some of the things that happened to them. And in the middle of all of this, there's also a fable. It's called The Girl in the Vessel. There are many, many different versions that we hear, that all the different characters know. But in all of them, it's always about this one woman who is being kind of constrained, who's being trapped in this vessel, this glass vessel that is supposed to protect her. And inside, she can see out, in her own little world, there's like fake stars, there's like, other things going on, but like she can see out into the actual world, and she wants to be there. And what happens when the glass breaks? So there's a lot of repetitions like that of like yeses and nos. There are lots of like refrains of almost kind of static from something. Like it could be the radio, it could be like the birds talking. So there's a lot of that. And I think all of these imageries can be interpreted as symbols for something. And I think they all contribute to that sense of loss, the sense of melancholy about what we have lost, and that how the world has changed, and how that change is very overwhelming, because very often we feel that we don't have any control over what's happening out there, that there are too many horrible things happening, and that like that something is going to give. Like it's the time where change is going to happen. There's going to be a clash. The end is coming, and you don't know if you will make it out. You don't know what's on the other side. And I think anyone who kind of wakes up in the morning and be like, I can't, I just can't do it today. I think that sense, really like it's throughout the book that gets carried through with all the different symbols and all the different images and all the different little plot lines. And it does feel at times kind of suffocating that you kind of like, I don't know what to do. And it weighs you down and it makes you like you can't move. However, I think the book is not just like doom and gloom. This is, even though it does make you feel immobilized in many ways, even the way the chapters are numbered, it starts from 180 and it counts down into the end of the book. So you know that the end is coming, it's inevitable. But like the title's image, an hourglass, yes, time is running out. Yes, the sand is trickling down. You can see it. But we also know that once the sand settled, someone can flip that over. And I think that's what the book does, is that through all these symbols, all these different metaphors that Lindsey Drager, the author, try to put in, it offers that hope. Yes, the world is changing. Yes, there might be new territories for us. It's things that we are unknown, but change itself is not new. It is a cycle that will repeat and has repeated. And I think it offers perhaps the book offers perhaps a different way of tackling that dread that we have. Near the end, there was a really powerful scene with the kids in the town, and I think that scene really kind of give us a way of like, well, this is one way out. How do we use the past, what we remember from the past, to build that future? And yes, things are different. The materials that we use to build this future is different, is new. We've never done it before, but we can still use that, and use what we know from the past to get that same result of wonder in the world, despite the losses that we might have already suffered. And it really kind of focused on like not getting stuck in thinking about something like in just one way, learning that like maybe we can learn from taking different frame of reference, where perhaps like from somebody who doesn't know the past that we keep longing for and that we keep trying to rewind back to. Kids, for example, they don't know what that world is like. Some of the kids in this world doesn't know what a bird is, but yet like they don't know what we know. But in their world, like it's not something that has vanished because that has never been there in the first place. We are trying to get back to it, but they have a different point of view. They have a different way of tackling this world. And I think that's is that message of hope, that is like the hourglass, that we can turn it around. We can have a different way of thinking, a different way of being. Things change, and a lot of things you can look at it in multiple ways. One of the lines in the book, again, that keep repeating, is that 180 degrees is both a line and a half circle. So it really all depends on how you look at it. So if you're looking for an introspective read, as you can imagine, something that, yeah, does drowse in the dread sometimes, it could be fairly challenging to read, especially when you're not feeling it, and it does kind of feels hopeless, but it does make the reader work to find that hopefulness, and it is there. I think there's so many different. I think that's why the author uses so many of those different images, because I think for each person, we all have our different crises. We all have different things that are hard for us, and that are challenging. And so depending on which image you see, like you see that hope in there, it does make you work for that. And sometimes we don't want to see it, we can't see it, but it's there. And I think that what's the more I think about it, at first when I first read the book, I'm like, there's just too much going on. And I felt like, okay, well, either you pick the birds or you pick the space thing, like pick one. But I think once I read it, and I think more about it, and I realize that that's what the author is doing. Like, she's trying to give us different ways of thinking about sort of that same thing. And for different people, different things will work. And I think that's sort of the message. So, it got kind of like a really beautiful imagery in the book. It's got some very dreamlike kind of prose. So if you are into that, then this book may be for you. It is called The Avian Hourglass, and it's by Lindsey Drager.
Wonderful. Thank you, Virginia. And thank you to both of my book friends for coming along on this somewhat chaotic ride to a very clear theme that we all had in mind and followed to a T. Excellent. Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening as well. This is the end of our episode on fall-ish things, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you will come back next week as well. We will see you then. Have a good day.